Now I'm sure most of you watching this channel have heard of the Boss 302 Mustang. Super famous, Trans Am racing, homologation special. But I bet a lot less of you have heard of the Boss 429. Alright, the Boss 429. Why does this car exist? And no, I am not misspeaking. This is not a 427, nor is it even a 428 Ford also made. A 429 cubic inch engine. This car is also a homologation special, just like the Boss 302. Whew! Oh man, she makes some power. But while the Boss 302 was a whole package designed to go Trans Am racing, the Boss 429 was pretty much made just for its engine. See, Ford needed a new NASCAR engine to compete with Dodge and some of their crazy engines they were coming out with at the time. So they developed this 429 engine. It is unofficially called the Boss 429 engine, but it never really had that designation inside of Ford. Now, as you can see by just how much we are struggling to keep this thing under wraps, it makes a shit ton of horsepower and not a lot of brakes. That's alright, gives us an opportunity to do another burnout. Now, we talked about in the Corvette episode how the ZR1 was like the last Corvette that felt like a muscle car. And driving this, a real muscle car, you know, solid axle, lots of power, old bias ply tires. This was the experience I was talking about. Living life on the edge. Now, this version we are driving today is from the 70s muscle car pack. Link in the description. This comes with the Boss 302, the Boss 429, the Boss 302R, which was the factory race car version of the Boss 302 that you could buy, and then this, which is the mod author's creation combining that Boss 302R with the 429 engine, and just for the heck of it, giving it a bunch more power. Now, this version is making a whopping 527 horsepower, which is a bit unrealistic for what the 429 ever made, even in race trim. Well, maybe not in race trim, I guess, but in street trim, quite an exaggeration. In fact, all these numbers are a little bit exaggerated in this mod, but that kind of goes back to there is this mythos of old muscle cars making way more power than what they actually made. For instance, even the regular version of this mod, Boss 429 version of this mod, is making 471 horsepower, which is interesting because in reality the Boss 429 engine was only ever rated at 375 horsepower from Ford. And that's gross horsepower. Think engine on a dyno stand number. This thing is a great drift car. Oh my god. Not net horsepower, which I think is what this game is actually portraying. If that horsepower number that's on the graph, I think, is wheel horsepower. So these are making way more horsepower than the actual car did. So not exactly realistic. In reality, you know, like the Boss 302, for instance, it's a famous car. only made 290 horsepower. My Fiesta ST with a big turbo will make that. But it's also suggested that ratings were underrated. The way they were testing it was different. That kind of deserves its own video, if I'm being honest. Much like a lot of topics we touched on this channel. Whoa. Little too much there. At the end of the day, she is a muscle car. Okay, here we go. Gotta do a fucking Austin Powers move here in this thing. So yeah, in reality, this car probably put down 320 to the wheels, not 520. So a little exaggeration, but I can live with that because you know what? This thing is fun. Now, to just speak of this mod for a second, it has a couple flaws. One, now I'm doing this with paddles, and I'm sure, you know, this thing deserves a shifter. These cars only ever came with a manual, which I think is very interesting. Good job, Ford. So, of course, you know, rock. All right, we'll pay attention to the road this time, but this will give me an opportunity to show another problem before I get back to that. We're in first gear right now. I'm going to hit the gas. That just seems weird. That seems very weird. I don't know if it's a because we're using paddles thing. The other problem is with paddles is when you upshift, it flares. Now, the base Kunos cars, of course, don't do that. Other mods don't do that, but I have noticed some mods do that. So I think there's just something when people are making these mods that you have to change or, you know, adapt to paddles, maybe. You know, they're probably using an actual shifter, so it's not a huge problem. You just, you know, lift on the upshift, not a big deal. But just something to notice. If you do not have a shifter, you know, and you want to use this mod, it'll teach you to not do that. The other thing I've really noticed, I went with the white car because if you take a look at that hood scoop right there, you'll notice some weirdness. That's supposed to be black, and it is pretty much black on the white car. But if you pick any other color, for whatever reason, the color bleeds through. So if you pick blue, the hood scoop's blue. If you pick red, the hood scoop's red. If you pick orange, the hood scoop's brown. So, while there are a few minor issues with this mod, I will say, and I've driven all 4 of the cars. We picked this one because it's the fastest. They're all just super fun. And like I said, they feel right. Like, they feel like the fire-breathing dragons these things were, you know, legend to be. And the brakes? Yep, the brakes are bad. The way they're supposed to be. Now, to get back to the Boss 429, because we're getting to the top of the mountain here, I need to get this review done. The 429 is a very interesting engine. They just made it for NASCAR. This was just a homologation special. NASCAR said you had to make at least 500 street-going versions of a car with that engine. And so Ford had to put this engine in something. Why not a Mustang? But the engine was so big. The valve covers are huge. This is just an overhead valve engine. It is not an overhead cam engine. Semi-hemispherical cylinder heads. So while Dodge was, of course, doing the full Hemi, Dodge had a full Hemi, Ford a semi-Hemi. I'm gonna launch myself off the fucking cliff for that joke. But this thing had a bunch of race car stuff in it, designed to withstand long NASCAR races. For instance, the coolant passages. There were no coolant passages that passed from the block into the head, which is how pretty much every other engine works. It actually had separate passages. This allowed it to be like a closed deck engine on steroids. It was also O-ringed, which is a thing you don't really see much anymore, except on like insane high horsepower builds. So the head gasket had O-rings in it, but you just don't see that very often because head gasket technology's come so far since back then. It's ridiculous that to tame 400 horsepower, you needed O-ringed head gaskets back in that day. It just goes to show how far we've come. But yeah, this engine was so big. Ford didn't actually even make this car themselves. They went to... Keep dropping it down into neutral. Now this engine was so big that Ford didn't even actually make this car themselves. They had to outsource this to CarCraft in Dearborn, Michigan to modify the Mustang's front end to just fit this engine in there. And they actually contracted CarCraft to produce these cars too. These were not made in an actual Ford assembly line. Now this engine was so big, so heavy, that Ford and CarCraft tried their best to get the balance right. They put the battery in the back now, and they even equipped this thing with a rear sway bar. First production Mustang, I should say, to ever get a rear sway bar. So, thought that was interesting. God, I love this thing just drifts so well. And on our actual lap, we're gonna have a hard time not drifting it. Now, I kept saying that Ford developed this engine for NASCAR, and they shoved it into Mustang because why not? But the plan originally was to use the Mustang in NASCAR. But that plan got scrapped for reasons I am not sure of. Ford decided, nope, we are not using the Mustang. But they did use the 429. It went into the Torino and the Cyclone NASCAR cars. And as far as I know, did pretty damn well. But we had to wait until 2019, actually, to get a Mustang in NASCAR, which I think is just interesting. Like, it was always like the Torinos, or, I mean, then, you know, of course, when you got to the Cup Car Series, the Tauruses and the Fusions and stuff, the things that made zero sense, they weren't anything related. But then again, even the modern Mustang Cup cars have nothing in common with their Mustang counterparts besides a badge. Oh man, I hate that flare. Oh no. We're good. We're fine. We're fine. Don't go off into the abyss. I might be stuck. Oh, that's a hole in the ground. Whee! Boop. Well, gives us another opportunity to do a burnout. That's reverse. I'll never get tired of that. Never. I need an old muscle car just to do burnouts. Now, the reason you've probably never heard of a Boss 429 is because they didn't exactly fly off the shelves. Oh no. They needed to make 500 for the homologation special. They did surpass that, but not by a ton. Overall, I don't know how well this mod really recreates the driving experience of a Boss 429, and we'll probably never exactly know, especially because this is a race car version of it. But, like I said before, it feels right. And to me, that's what really matters in sim racing a lot of times. But now it's time for me to stop my yapping and see just how fast we can get this thing to the top of Pikes Peak. All right, 3, 2, 1. keep myself from getting those flares. There we go. Lots of grip, but let's be careful. Probably more grip than these bias plies ever actually gave. Certainly a lot of power, easy to oversteer, but also pretty easy to control it. Gentle on the brakes, because these, of course, do not have ABS. Probably be pushing a little harder. But she is a scary one. Be brave, brake early. Probably didn't brake that early, but that's fine. Tippy-toe it around the corners. You either gotta tippy-toe it or drift it, one of the two. It's a little understeery at high speeds. Got her trick. Just talking me this shit in a Mustang. It is white and black, why not? You can tell I'm concentrating when the tongue comes out of the mouth. Habit I've had since I was a child. There we go, come on. "100 miles an hour down the straight. So much power. Like I said, I think these tires are doing me a little extra favor than what old bias plies really would back in the day. But then again, you know, she just lets go kind of at some unforeseen times. I kind of like taking that corner a little bit wider like that. Still struggle with this corner though. Big brakes, big brakes, big brakes, big brakes, big brakes, big brakes. Could have done that better. Overall though, I'm feeling pretty good about this lap so far. See if I can just concentrate. My inputs become a lot better. You do have to be kind of gentle on your inputs with this car, I will say. It is a strange car. It is a strange car to drive. Certainly feels like a muscle car. I think somebody a little more braver than me, who is just used to loose setup cars, would probably do a little bit better. I still get scared when a car is too loosely set up, and I might be able to tweak a little bit out of that with tires and aero changes, but there's not a whole lot of tweaks you can do on this mod. It'll actually be a decently quick lap. I'm curious how it does against the ZR1, considering they're both muscle cars. At least they are in my book. Definitely got to keep the RPM up as well. This thing does not like low RPM, which may be a sign of its race engine heritage. Boss 302 would have been so much better to drive up here. Way less weight in the front end. But horsepower is king on the mountain. So big engine it is. Yeah, it's going to be a little slow. It has the horsepower, it just doesn't have the handling or the brakes. This car is from 1970 though, so we can forgive it for not being as fast as a modern car. Do not launch yourself off the cliff now. Do not. Wow, this actually be pretty slow. We got a few corners to go still. I always forget how long this top section is. Yeah, those brakes are costing us a lot of time because I got to brake so early. Come on, don't spin out right at the last corner. Oh man, across the line, we're gonna be under 12. 1150, yeah, that was a little slower, huh? Oh, hey, didn't see you there. Editor Matt here. Yeah, 1150 is an incredibly fast time. What the heck was I talking about? I think in my head I was getting the 12s and the 11s mixed up. Yeah, things incredibly quick. Quicker than the ND Miata, quicker than the R34. Granted, I need to redo those laps. But yeah, just wanted to chime in here real quick to let you know that I see it too. I'm not crazy. I was just confused in the moment. Anyways, back to current Matt. I don't think it's a bad time for what is essentially a 1970s race car with way too much power, way too much weight in the front end. I don't know. This thing, I can't fault it though. As a mod, it is incredibly fun. It looks good. It sounds good. It drifts amazing. If you need a good drift car, if you're learning to drift in Assetto Corsa, pick up this Mustang package and pick this version, the 429R. That's the one we're driving. If you like the changes that we did this time, a little bit format change, give me a like, give me a subscribe, leave a comment down below, do all that kind of stuff. Let me know. I think this is how we're going to do it from here on out. Gave this car a much fairer shake than I normally would. So that's going to do it for us today, guys. Until next time, peace.